Everyone feared the worst when Rashawn Slater was held out last minute in Week 18 against the Raiders, but we got the best news we could have possibly gotten on Tuesday because he was back at practice, which leads me to believe he's going to be playing in the game on Saturday.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, well, after Rashawn Slater was a late scratch against the Raiders, we were all very, very concerned. Fortunately, Rashawn Slater made his way back to practice and is hopefully ready to go for Saturday because it is a big, big game. As we all know, it's one and done. Speaking of that, Coach Harbaugh, is he going to be more aggressive in these situations now that it's definitely one and done? There's no tomorrow. You got to go get it done. And the Chargers absolutely cannot overlook the Houston Texans.
Yeah, man, it's been making me feel pretty uncomfortable just how lopsided the analysis has been as far as the Chargers being such prohibitive favorites, but it's not going to be an easy game. But you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you can get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. David, I know you went to a dark place when Rashawn Slater was held out of the Raiders game in Week 18 due to knee discomfort while stretching. Then when Jim Harbaugh was asked about it, he said, "We're going to get an MRI as soon as we possibly can," and also basically said it wasn't a move that happened out of abundance of caution. The doctor said he couldn't go, and he didn't go. So, I mean, it left us all like, man, well, you're feeling really good about this matchup and getting the 5 seed, but without Rashawn Slater, it changes a lot, and I think we saw the impact of that, especially early on in that game last week, and credit to the offensive line who bounced back. Joe Alt moving to the left side seamlessly, but you need Rashawn Slater in the playoffs, and so after hearing literally nothing until Tuesday, and then finally hearing Jim Harbaugh say, hey, Rashawn Slater is going to be back at practice today, David, he missed the entire 2022 season almost, and then ended up missing a playoff game where he was supposed to potentially come back the next week, and I felt terrible for him. So for me, if he's limited at practice, if there's any possible way for a super tough dude to get into this game, he's going to do it, and I think this is just gigantic news that dramatically changes the Chargers' chances in this game.
Well, and he's having an all-pro season, Daniel. He's been absolutely phenomenal as a pass protector and as a run blocker. He has been crucial to the success of the Chargers offense, and we got to put it into numbers here. The Texans have 2 guys that have combined for 23 sacks between them. Rashawn Slater has allowed 3 sacks all season long, and 2 of those came against the same team against Myles Garrett, which also it showed that Rashawn Slater wasn't right with those snaps because he just doesn't lose that badly. And oh, by the way, that's 3 sacks and 22 pressures in over 547 pass blocking snaps. So that is pure, unadulterated dominance from Rashawn Slater at the left tackle position. It is a absolutely imperative that he is out there and ready to go to protect Justin Herbert's blind side. Hats off to Joe Alt. He did a great job switching over to the left side, but now you have your 2 elite pass protectors back in business on both sides. Rashawn Slater on the left and Joe Alt on the right.
It just doesn't give you an obvious weakness at tackle, at least, right? That we know the interior has had their struggles, but to have, one tackle where you know that you can kind of try to attack that and you know that it's going to be a chink in the armor, to not have that because it's basically a pick your poison going up against Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, who's also been absolutely fantastic. Like, having both of these guys feels like you can at least limit what the biggest strength of the Texans defense is in this game, and that is those 2 edge rushers, right? The Chargers' biggest stresses and their biggest weakness so far this year has been the interior. they have some guys on the interior that can definitely give the Chargers problems, but it's not like what they have on the outside, where if you don't have good tackles and you're going up against this pair of edge rushers, it's going to be a really, really long day. And I think it just also gives Justin Herbert the best chance to play his best, which is what you need in this playoffs, because we know if Justin Herbert gets banged up, he isn't always the same player, even if he goes to try and, tough it out there. So the fact that you have both of these guys going into this one and done matchup, as you put it, right, a game that you have to have, it just really, really changes how I feel about this game, because I would not be feeling great about it if he wasn't out there. And I do believe he's going to be playing for this team on Saturday, unless there's some sort of regression this week. But the Chargers also, in other news, did open up the 21-day return window for wide receiver Simi Fehoko, who obviously is more of a special teams guy, more of a run blocking guy as far as what he brings to this offense. At the same time, definitely a good glue guy, and someone that basically said publicly, David, that he was good to go. So it makes me think, hey, with Josh Palmer not practicing, with the kind of, the uncertainty around that, hey, he could be going back this week and be on the field on Saturday against the Texans.
Yeah, and Simi Fehoko was a guy that in the offseason and into training camp, did absolutely everything he could to be able to earn a spot, and into the preseason. He shined. He made all the plays that came his way, and he was able to really secure that kind of one of those last wide receiver spots.
Yeah.
And he unfortunately only got to play 8 games, 6 receptions on 16 targets for 106 yards, 17.7 yards per reception, which is great. But yeah, this is a guy who is definitely going to add an element as a run blocker. He's got great size, 6'3", 220 pounds, and he is a guy that enjoys this type of work. He enjoys the dirty work. He wants to get in on these plays. He wants to contribute in any way possible. And so getting this type of guy back, I think, is just another bit of reinforcements for this Chargers offense.
Yeah, and I think especially with what the defense has on the Texans side of things, you're going to need somebody else to step up outside of Quentin Johnson, outside of Alain McConkey. They do have 2 good corners over there they're going to be matched up with. But that's going to leave a really good matchup for whoever that third guy is. I don't think it's going to be Simi necessarily, just because even when he was with the team still, the last few games he had 3 targets and 0 catches, so it wasn't like he was a huge part of the offense. But when he was making plays, they were big plays, and they were big plays down the field. But a 36% catch rate obviously is something that's pretty inefficient, and it would hope it would be a lot better if they are going to, want to target him, give him some of those chances down the sideline and show that he can convert on them. But it does bring us to this from Donald Rickert, who says, assuming that there's only one more player that can be brought back from IR, aside from Simi Fehoko, who we know could get activated, who would you choose realistically? And David, it is a Chargers mailbag, and this is a great first question to get into, because the Chargers now have 1 activation left. You get 2 extra in the playoffs. We assume one of those is going to be Simi, since they opened up the window on him. Picking that other guy is a little bit tough, though.
Yeah, there's really only one other guy in my mind that kind of makes any kind of sense, and that would be Asante Samuel Jr. And unfortunately, we haven't heard absolutely anything about his injury. About him potentially coming back, nothing. No whispers of any kind. Yeah. And the thing is I don't even know if I even want him to come back, which I think the reason why is he played 4 games and he had 4 missed tackles, and all of them were big missed tackles that led to big, massive plays. Cam Hart and Tarheeb Steele. Cam Hart came in and played 11 games, has 2 missed tackles in 460 snaps. Tarheeb Steele, a couple more, 12 missed tackles in 785 snaps, but he brings 4 pass breakups and 4 interceptions to the table. So if you're going to take some of those chances, you better have the reward to go with those risks.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's a few guys they could do it. That's just really the guys that we know aren't season-ending injuries, right? It's basically Brendan Rice, who we still haven't heard anything about, in the same kind of camp as Asante Samuel Jr., where it kind of just popped up out of nowhere, and we haven't heard anything about it since. Another guy's Jalen Reagor, right? Another dude who you've had some deep success with on this team. Hard to know. I think this is a broken hand, so potentially not a season-ending type of injury. You could also throw Eli Apple. Maybe David wants Eli Apple over Asante Samuel Jr. He was playing well when he had to suit up on short notice. So there's not a lot of options there, but I do think it does kind of just shine more light on how weird the Asante Samuel Jr. situation is, because even if you could have him, I still think it is a positive, because it doesn't necessarily mean he's starting. He is a good coverage player at his best, and if you had these dime packages and things like that you wanted to put out there, he's a guy that you feel like could help you in those situations. I'd probably rather have him on the field than Jasir Taylor. So I think that would definitely be someone I would bring back. but there's just no inkling or any sort of news at any point that Jim Harbaugh has ever been asked about it, that he's given any inclination that he's going to be back on the field this season, really at all. But we also never heard that he had a season-ending injury. But we still have more great stuff to get into, including what this playoff could come down to. And that is, in big moments, is Jim Harbaugh going to be aggressive, or are we going to see the conservative nature we saw most of the season? And also, what the offense can do to avoid the droughts that caused a lot of their losses this year, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. I do want to tell you guys about FanDuel, though, because from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. The lines are out for the wild card weekend. The Chargers are favorites in this game, but maybe not as big of favorites as it seems right now in the media. The Chargers are 2.5-point favorites per FanDuel at the last time I checked it. In Houston, right? An away game, a road game. Chargers 6-3 on the road, but Chargers are only one of two road teams that are actually favored. Two teams that them and the Vikings have a good chance to win, but maybe not as good, right, as it seems out there. You'd think they were a 10-point favorite, the way some of the discussion has gone, but there's always so much more on FanDuel to bet on besides just who wins, like over-unders. Anytime touchdown scores is my personal favorite, so I'll be looking at that this weekend. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. David, let's continue this Chargers mailbag because we got a lot of good questions to get to this week. And thank you to the everydayers who hit us up on the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 or hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter to give us your questions for today. We have this one, and it's a good question about what we can expect from this coaching staff and how aggressive they could be in this playoff run.
Hey, what up, guys? This is Matthew. So we're going to playoffs now, and was curious about, Jim Harbaugh when we were playing against the Patriots during the season. He was going for it a couple times. So I was just curious, do you guys think that would be carrying on over to the playoffs, in a situation in playoffs, like not being too conservative? Do you expect Jim Harbaugh to be aggressive now, going to playoffs? Let me know what you guys think. Thank you, guys. What's up? Let's go.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of this pertains to the 2-game stretch for the Chargers. Had 3 times on the opponent's side of the field where they decided to punt it instead of, in a couple of situations, letting Cameron Dicker go for a really long field goal, or just what you would kind of hope the most for, let Justin Herbert go for it, because you're not going to gain too much field position on what you're about to do. Like if you punt it and you get a touchback, we're talking about times where the Chargers gained, I think one time, 19 yards of field position instead of just going for it and giving your offense a chance to go put points on the board. So, David, I did like what he's talking about. What he is talking about was a game against the Patriots, and it wasn't a desperation moment, right? Because desperation, 4th downs, and just going for it because kind of the numbers tell you to do it are two different things. If you're down by 14 and it's the 4th quarter, you're going to go for it on 4th down, obviously.
You got to,
but
yeah.
I think this part of it is, when the game was still very much in the balance, he went for it on 4th and 3 on the New England 42, and they ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive. But it's still kind of hard for me to think that an old dog is going to totally learn new tricks here, David, and just become Dan Campbell in the playoffs. Not that I'm expecting, there's a lot of gray area in between those two things, obviously. But Jim Harbaugh is Jim Harbaugh, and it'll be very interesting to see kind of how aggressive he wants to be, especially when it's not a desperation type of, go for it situation.
Yeah, I mean, in stark contrast to what Brandon Staley did, Jim Harbaugh only went for it on 4th down 16 times the entire season. Now, he did convert 62% of those tries, so that's definitely positive. And I think the only thing to me that kind of gives me maybe a little bit more hope that he might be a more aggressive is when he was back in college football last year in pursuit of a national championship, he was a little bit more aggressive going for it on 4th downs in certain situations where he needed to be able to keep the ball moving and to be able to go, put games away and win games to be able to get to that national title. So I think maybe in a situation to where, like I said, it's there is no tomorrow. You got to go out there and go do it. And I feel like if he feels it, then yeah, he might, but I'm with you. I don't know if he's going to change too much more than what we've really seen him provide all season long.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up before kind of, him in the aggressive moment he had in the college football playoff last year in the first round when they were playing Alabama, 3 minutes, 19 seconds left, 4th and 3, or no, this one, 4th and 2, but they were deep on their own side of the field. 3.5 minutes left to go. They have all 3 of their timeouts. They could punt it to Alabama because if they don't get it, the game's basically over. Alabama's in field goal range. They can make it a 2-score game with less than 3 minutes to play. They end up going for it, right? They could have tried to trust their defense to get them one more possession, right? We can use their timeouts, all those things. He ended up going for it. They end up tying the game and winning it in overtime. You hope that, that's a little bit desperation, but they still could have arguably still punted it there and trying to get the ball back. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I don't expect a Tiger to change his stripes too much, but I do think when the stakes are ratcheted up, Jim Harbaugh is going to be focused on winning. And if he thinks that's the best thing to do, and feeling the game flow, I think he's going to do it, but wouldn't expect it to be super more aggressive than we've already seen. But let's get this next one. I think another big part and a big theme for this playoff run and how the Chargers are going to do is the Chargers offense keeping it cooking. Let's hear what Nick has for us this week.
Daniel, David, it's Nick calling. I just wanted to tell you guys how much of a pleasure this season has truly been to experience. And I am so grateful that this week we have a week full of shows based off of a game that we're going to be playing this weekend. So here's my question. As we know, the offense sometimes stalls a little bit, even though recently we've been playing very, very well. What would you two say is the one thing Greg Roman, Justin Herbert cannot do to avoid our offense stalling? Thanks, guys. Love you.
That's an interesting question, David, and I think something that kind of looms as a concern over many Chargers fans' heads, which is just like, hey, the offense has been great, but you can't have one of those droughts we've seen where we're talking about, 5 scoreless halves so far this season. If you don't score in a half in one of these games in the playoffs, your playoff run is over, period, end of story. So what would you start with as far as, hey, what can these guys do? What can Greg Roman do? Or what can Justin Herbert do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, so for Greg Roman, for me, it's quite simple, is don't fall into the desire to run the ball automatically on first down.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we've seen way too often this season is the commitment to the running game to a fault. Running for 1 yard, running for 2 yards, and not putting yourself in very favorable second and third down opportunities. When the Chargers offense has been humming over the last 3 games, scoring 34 points plus per game, it's because they've let Justin Herbert cook, let him throw the football on first down, throwing it down the field, being aggressive, and that's how they've been able to really sustain offense. As far as what Justin Herbert needs to make sure that he does not shy away from doing is running with the ball when the opportunities present themselves. Don't sit in the pocket for too long. If there is a lane, go take it, especially against the Houston Texans, which the last 3 or 4 games I've watched, the quarterbacks have had a lot of success running against that defense. So if you see it, go take it. Fortunately, he had that big run against the Raiders. Hopefully he can parlay that into this game here because the Chargers offense is at its most dynamic when you have to worry about the running game, Justin Herbert's arm, and Justin Herbert's legs.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I think for Greg Roman, it's just to keep evolving, right? Because I think we have seen that from him this year where it doesn't look like the offense we saw the first few weeks where Justin Herbert was averaging like 120 passing yards per game. You have to continue to keep leaning into Justin Herbert's strengths, and it feels like that happened probably right around the Arizona Cardinals game, even though they lost that game. Justin Herbert ripped it up and threw for 350 in that game. Also, put up almost 400 yards of total offense. And it's like, okay, this is what the offense can look like. They didn't finish drives in that game, and they didn't, they only scored field goals. But I think that's important. I think the other thing, too, is just stay creative without getting too cute.
Yeah.
Right? Stick to the play action and don't overcomplicate things. I want to see you finding those mismatches and things, the misdirections, all of that. But I don't need to see like the trick plays that could potentially go for a 10-yard loss either, right? Or have, a wide receiver throwing an interception or something like that. For Justin Herbert, man, keep doing what you're doing. He's been on an unbelievable heater over the last 3 games, and I think that's had a lot to do with the health because in that second half against the Bucs, I just didn't feel like he was healthy after getting totally beat up. But he has 110-plus passer rating in 3 straight games. The crazy thing is that's the second time he's done it this season. And the other crazy thing is the only other time, he's only done it one other time, had a 3-game stretch of having a passer rating of over 110. And it wasn't in 2021 when he put up those big numbers. It was actually his rookie season. So he did it one time in 4 years, had a 3-game stretch like the one he's currently in. He's done it twice already this year. And I think the other thing kind of lending itself to your point is just do what you have to do in big moments. Like I can't see key third downs where you're throwing short of the sticks, extend the play, find the play that's going to get you a first down, get out of the pocket, run the ball if you have to. But there's going to be some times in this playoff run, like there is for every great quarterback, where he's going to have to put on Superman's cape and he's going to have to go do it himself. And that's what I expect from him in this playoff run. But we do have more great stuff to get into because, David, the narratives around this game are starting to bother me a little bit. And absolutely the Chargers should win this game, but everyone acting like it's the Texans are going to be pulling off a historic upset if they're somehow able to get this done is driving me nuts. So we have to get into that and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about PrizePicks because PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy app with over 5 million active members, and it's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy because unlike on other apps, PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's also the best way to get action in sports in states that most of can't, like Texas, Georgia, and California, which I love. The only thing better than PrizePicks is playoff PrizePicks, and you guys can get in on action this weekend on Saturday's game by going with, it's this easy, Justin Herbert throwing for more or less than 232.5 passing yards, and pair that with Ladd McConkey getting more or less than 72.5 receiving yards. You can go with J.K. Dobbins, you can go with Cameron Dicker, all the projections for the Chargers on PrizePicks for this game on Saturday. All you have to do, download the PrizePicks app, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. It's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. I also need to tell you guys about Rocket Money because did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me, and I've had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. And I think for me, it was having this moment of just kind of, you feel so dumb, but you're so happy that you're starting to save money on stuff that you either don't use or stuff that you just completely forgot that you were paying for. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. David, we still have more Chargers mailbag to get into, and thank you to all the everydayers who hit us up at Locked On LAC to give us your questions or call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. And as always, thank you for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where they have 2 shows a day covering everything going on around the league, but most importantly, bringing on the people that cover their teams every single day, with Tyler, the madman, rolling in the morning, who's just breathing fire because of the Titans dumpster fire right now, and my guy Tony Wiggins in the barbershop on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you guys go check them out as well. David, let's get to the Chargers mailbag here. We still have a few great ones to get into, including Ed Holinsky here, who says, with the Chargers being a road favorite, how do you not fall into a false sense of security against the Texans? I think this is a huge underlying theme for this week, and a huge key for this Chargers team is to be prepared. I think the nice thing is with Jim Harbaugh, that's why you bring him in. You bring him in to have your team prepared and to be the more well-prepared team, to be the better coach team when you get to a one-win and move on type of format. Jim Harbaugh has played with these stakes. He knows what it takes, and you have to assume the coaching staff he put together is going to have these guys ready to go.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been there, he's done that, and he's won. He's won these playoff games, and he has that track record of success that he can lean on. He has that inventory of experiences that he can lean on. And also, is you block out all the noise. Don't listen to any of the stuff the media is putting out there, the bulletin board material, all of that nonsense. Let the people like me and Daniel talk about the game, and you focus on winning the game. That's what it has to be all about, because this is definitely not a team that you can overlook. They're 10-7. They won their division, and they beat the Buffalo Bills earlier this season, a team that beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And last time I checked, the Chiefs have 2 losses this season, and one of them doesn't even really count. So That's why you can't overlook the Houston Texans. Anybody can win on any given game day. So you got to lock in, be prepared, stay disciplined, and go out there and earn the win. Enough about the talking. You got to go strap up and earn it.
Well, I think inside the building, I don't think anyone thinks this game is easy, right? I mean, last week at the beginning, it looked like they thought they could just show up, and thankfully they turned it around against the Raiders, right? But that's what you can't afford to have this week. And I do think these players should be playing with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, because kind of the narrative that's been written around them all season is that they can't beat good teams. Even if it's a dysfunctional team, the Texans are a good team. Go out and beat them and prove, the doubters wrong. But this is an interesting one we have here from Justin Herbert, who says, does the Texans team compare to the Buccaneers team? This is interesting. An elite wide receiver one, a top-tier running back, a very capable quarterback, along with nasty edge rush and great DBs. The Bucs aren't the best team in the NFL, but they matched up well against the Chargers. Curious to see how the Texans match up. It's a good question, David, because it's not always about beating the best teams, right? You could say the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL. The Chargers matched up well against them. Sometimes teams can just have your number. Do you think there's any credence to this? Because the Bucs aren't the best team in the league, but they sure put a beating on the Chargers.
Yeah, I think what the primary differences for me is the offensive line
that's the biggest one.
Far superior with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that's it's not even close. The Texans have given up 54 sacks this year. 54. That's a ton.
Yeah.
CJ Stroud, he's a good player. He has some mobility. He's not the most athletic quarterback in the world. And sometimes he makes some bad decisions, but he has gotten beat up this year. There's been a revolving door of people trying to figure it out on the offensive line. Charger fans know that exceptionally well. We've seen a lot of combinations, not this year, thankfully. You've had to have some continuity, which is big, but that I think is the biggest primary difference between the two football teams is the offensive line. I think the Texans have a couple of good running backs, some guys that can really hurt you. The Buccaneers, obviously, they did as well, and they used him to great effectiveness. I think, honestly, Baker Mayfield's having a much better year this year than CJ Stroud is, so I would give the edge to Baker in that department. But, yeah, I think there's some similarities to draw, and I think it is just make sure that you show up and play this game and don't, underestimate them, which, we saw what happens against the Buccaneers. If you don't put it together, they can take off and run away with the game, so can't let that happen.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is definitely the offensive line. The Bucs had an elite offensive line that totally neutralized the Chargers pass rush and totally just kind of turned things off for the Chargers defense. It totally dismantled what the Chargers had. It exposed the defensive backs. It exposed the pass rush a little bit once they couldn't get home on Baker, and then he absolutely torched them. I'd say that the other big part of it was, like I talked about a little bit earlier, Justin Herbert wasn't the same guy in the second half.
Yeah.
That doesn't explain away any of the problems defensively that you had, but it explains why you put up 17 in the first half and didn't score a single point in the second half, because 17 and 17 is 34, David.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a good offensive half. You just couldn't continue it. I'd also say, the Broncos also had good defensive backs, a better corner than anything the Texans have with Patrick Surtain. They had the most sacks in the league coming into that game. And the Chargers offense still cooked them anyways, right? So
that's true.
But I do think the point of this is they have good players and plenty enough good players to beat you, which is why you have to show up. But I do think the Chargers match up a little bit better against the Texans than they did against the Buccaneers for sure. Let's get to this last one here from Nick from Santa Maria, who says, Will Dissly has been the gasoline for the fire this offense needed. However, Stone Smartt played admirable during Dissly's recovery. What are the chances we see both on the field at the same time? I think this game will be very much dependent on how well our tight ends play. And I would agree with that sentiment, right? I mean, we talked about it before. They have a good pass rush. They also have a couple of really good corners in Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter. What they've been a mess at really this season, especially because of injuries of the safeties and the coverage of the linebackers and things like that, places where the tight ends can expose you. What I would say is the key for this specific grouping, right? Because I do think we'll see some, 22 personnel or 12 personnel having two tight ends on the field at the same time. But you have to also be able to run the ball with Stone Smartt on the field. And Greg Roman even talked about that. He said, hey, we can't have it be a tell that when he's on the field, we're throwing the football. We have to be able to run it with him on the field as well. And I think the main thing here, David, is you want the elite kind of blocking that Will Dissly brings to the table, but you don't want to kind of lose the mismatch that is Stone Smartt, who's made some really incredible plays in the passing play, especially over the last month and a half.
Yeah, I mean, against the Patriots, Will Dissly played 44% of the snaps. Stone Smartt was 33% of the snaps. Unfortunately, against the Raiders, that number changed dramatically. It was 57% of the snaps for Will Dissly and only 19% for Stone Smartt. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a dynamic that you want to have on the field because Will Dissly has been a weapon in the passing game this year.
Yeah,
He absolutely has been. And Stone Smartt is definitely the more athletic of the pass catchers, can go up and get the ball and kind of make some of the more splash plays in the passing game. But yes, I expect them to be on the field because they are going to be able to exploit a weakness that the Texans have defensively.
And I think what the Texans do defensively will have a lot to do with kind of how they could deploy these guys potentially too, because I mean, if the Texans run a lot of man coverage and want, Quentin Johnson to have to win against man-to-man, Will Dissly's not great against man-to-man coverage. He's great at finding a soft spot in the zone. With Stone Smartt, you have a dude who we've seen the last few weeks can make really tough contested catches, goes and gets the football. He's a different kind of receiver. So yeah, it sucks that the return of Will Dissly has meant maybe less Stone Smartt, but maybe last week it was more of a matchup thing, and the fact that they just got up early on them so quickly, or just ended up leaving them behind. But yeah, I think you'd like to see both of these guys involved in the offense, whether they're on the field at the same time or not. But that is going to do it for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow because it is Crossover Thursday playoff edition. I mean, I think we've only had 2 or 3 of these since we've ever hosted this show, David. So I'm super excited to be linking up with the host of Locked On Texans, Locked On Chargers in the playoffs. A young, great quarterback versus another young, great quarterback. I'm really, really excited to talk to those guys, John Hickman and Big Sarge over there, because, man, I'm wondering how they feel about it. Are they feeling disrespected right now? Do they feel like they have a much better chance than what maybe the national narrative is? We're going to find that out tomorrow on the crossover episode. So to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well. You guys can also call to the voicemail line if you guys want to get in on the next fan mail show or any buy or sell shows at 323-524-7924. Also, just want to send a shout out and our best wishes and prayers to anyone that's going through anything right now in the greater Los Angeles area with the Palisade fires. We're definitely thinking about you guys. I've grown up with fires being a huge part and very impactful in my life, and I know just how scary it is. So wishing the best for all of the Bull fam and everyone else out there that's been affected by that right now, and just hoping for the best for you guys. And if you are someone that's been affected, hopefully we can be a little escape from the harsh reality that we're seeing right now in a very scary situation. But make sure you guys are back here for a little relief on Crossover Thursday tomorrow as we get into this big-time matchup on Saturday, and hope that Justin Herbert can get his first playoff win. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.